In today's video clip, we'll be talking about SmartChart data analysis for the Wavescan 3 instrument.
Now, once you've filtered your data, you can select the data you wish to see, the test series you wish to see, and then click this graph button here to view your data. So here we have the test report selected in the table view. And so we're now seeing a table of our readings. We can see for each check zone in the organizer, we have the 3 values that were selected in standard management, the balance, rating, and the CF value. And then here at the bottom, we can see the panel match, which is a direct comparison of 2 adjacent panels on a vehicle, and that was selected in the organizer selection. And now I can also, if I want to, select spectrum up here, and that will show me all of the spectrum values for each check zone. That includes the dullness, the W values, the DOI, the long wave and short wave. I can also check the tolerances box if I want to view the pass-fail tolerances that were used for these readings, and that was input in the standard management section. Now I can also select schematic up here at the top, and I'll still be able to see my data table, but now I'm also seeing a schematic or the schematic that was used for these measurements in the organizer section. And we can see each check zone and see how they compare, how the data compares to the actual position of the panel on the car. If I select line, I can view line graphs of my data. Now here it's saying that there's no data available for the selected orientation, and that's because horizontal is selected up here, which does not match any of my current data. So I can select vertical, or I can just select all. So that it meets the criteria, and I can see the graphs. Now you'll see that the graphs that are currently being displayed, I have the rating, I have the balance, and I have the CF value, as well as the difference values from the panel match. Now these are things that are determined in standard management. The scales are determined in standard management, and the difference values in organizer in the panel match section. But if I want to see different values, I can click graph, and I can select the scales I want to see from this box on the left. For example, I'll select film thickness and B value, balance, and send them over to the right. And now once I select my own custom scales, it's going to replace the default scale. So I'm only going to see film thickness and balance now. And the other thing I can do is I can actually orient these graphs and organize them any way I want to see them. Again, here in the graph section, instead of seeing them side by side, I'd like to see one on top of the other. So I can simply drag this here. And when I click OK, now the graphs are reoriented. I can also click on this magnifying glass here to expand the graphs and see them full screen. I can also see some additional graphs if I select balance spectrum. And this part in particular is unique to the Wavescan. Here I have my balance chart and my structure spectrum. On here, I'm just going to hover my mouse here and expand this a bit so we can see it better. So the balance chart, you want your readings to be in the green area based on the balance value and either the rating or the WD value. But this is dependent on certain settings in the standard management section. So next to that, I have my structure spectrum, and this is a visual representation of how much structure there is in each size range. And so we can see the curve for each of our check zones. We also have a limit curve, and that's determined by the tolerances set in the standard management section. And then we have a target curve, and this is calculated from the measurement data, and it represents what a perfectly balanced structure spectrum would look like for that surface. And then for this, we also have the magnifying glass. I can click to expand these and be able to see them better. If you want to know more about the structure spectrum and how you can use it to improve the appearance of your product and to improve your processes, we encourage you to reach out to your local Bic Gardner representative. I can view data from multiple test series by clicking the scorecard tab and then selecting my test series from the list on the left. So currently we have the scale in the columns and we have the data separated out by check zone in the rows. And this is averaging the values for each check zone across all test series. I can click this button here in this scale box if I want to select additional scales. And you can see here that the what we would refer to as the primary scales or the structure spectrum are available for you. I'm sorry, I can select dullness. I could add maybe long wave if I want to. I can also select difference values. This will give me the differences between panels as determined in the panel match function in Organizer. So now that I've got my scales selected, I can click OK. And in addition to that, I can also click this all scales box up here. If I check that box, I can go back into scales and you'll see that all of the scales available in the Wavescan are now available for me to select for this data. Now note this function where you can select any scale is only available for data from the Wavescan 3 units, not from older generations. So again, I can select additional scales if I want to, transfer them over, click OK, and I see them in my data table. You can also use the pivot chart to select different categories to separate out your data in different ways. For example, as mentioned, currently this table is separated out by scale in the columns and by check zone in the rows, but perhaps I'd like to see my data separated out by color. I can replace check zone with color simply by dragging them to the appropriate place. And now I'm seeing the average values for each of these colors across all 5 test series. Now I can also add additional categories to the columns or the rows. You can do more than one at a time. For example, if I wanted to add the model to this, that's our parameter 1, I can take that and drag it down 2 rows. And now my data is separated out not only by color, but also by model. I could also add orientation, for example, if I've designated some check zones as being horizontal versus vertical, I could average out the data by orientation, and I can add that to my columns or my rows section, depending on how I want to see it. And once I've got my data table exactly the way I want it, I can actually save that setting for the pivot chart just by clicking this plus sign here and typing in a name for my new layout. And then the next time I want to see my data configured in this way, I just click this drop-down box here and select the layout template I want. The trend section is for viewing data over time, in particular to compare how the readings on adjacent parts or panels will compare over time. Now the pivot chart works the same way as in the scorecard section. So if you need to review how the pivot chart works, you can review the scorecard section of these videos. Now, in order to view some graphs for my data, I can click on, for example, line, and then select the data I want to see. So I'll select 2 adjacent panels that I want to compare, the fender and the fascia, by holding down the control key on my keyboard, and I've now selected both. Now, currently, this data is separated out by timestamp, which is actually our parameter 5 in this case. So we did not manually enter a parameter 5, and so by default, it's the timestamp. But if you were to enter a parameter 5, such as a serial number, it was separated out by that parameter 5, or you can click this drop-down box and separate your data out by any of these other options. Now, currently, the way this data is displayed is averaging these 2 check zones for each of these timestamps. But if I want to separate out these two check zones, I can click the compare button, and instead of averaging the values, it's now showing me each check zone individually and how the readings change over time. Now I can click on Balance Spectrum to view the balance chart as well as my structure spectrum. And again, I have the option to have compare here checked or not checked. When it's not checked, it's showing me the average of each check zone for each timestamp. When I do have compare selected, it is averaging it or it's separating it out for each check zone individually. And so I can see that the yellow spectra are the fascia, the blue are the fender, and I can hover my mouse over the different spectra in order to see which test series or which check zone they came from.